I know what it's like to lead a church, to be a part of a church, to understand the process of a church and the concept of that. And when I say a church, I mean like an organization. So a church with 4 walls, a building and a process. And because you have the building and you have the process and you have the brand, you have the organization, people are drawn to that. They come to the church. So those who are seeking, those who are looking for answers, it's an obvious thing. They come there and I get it. So what would happen is Jess and I would be involved in the ministry, and many people would come to the church and we would offer Christ, we would offer the scriptures, we would offer the answer to life, the solution. And so then that becomes my thinking. My thinking is this is how it works. And then over a couple of years, the Lord started working in my heart and challenging me and convicting me and asking me, well, Warren, what do you think happens outside of these 4 walls? Like, do you think I'm not working? Do you think the work only happens inside the 4 walls of the church? And I know that that might be quite personal, only pertinent to me, but it was a real challenge. And so while I was going through that, the one day I went for a run, and as I rounded the corner, I saw a lady standing up against the wall. And she was standing there, and it was early in the morning, and she looked really forlorn, weathered, lost. And I looked at her, and it was almost like the first time that I looked and I saw a glimpse of what God sees. But what about this soul? What about this person? What about her? Like, what's her story? Is she seeking? And how do we reach these that are outside of the 4 walls of a building, who have their own story? And so I asked the question, well, what does lost look like? And that's a funny question, because we all know what it looks like. We've all actually been there, but it's also easy to forget what that feels like. And so maybe it's good to start not with the whole spiritual side of it, but let's just start from a practical, emotional, sort of human side. What does lost look like? What does it feel like to be lost? And this isn't about like I'm going on a journey and I've lost my way on the road and I don't know where to go. This is, how do I feel lost in my own life? When you walk into a room filled with people, you know where you are, like you're in the right room, but you feel alone. You feel like you don't belong. You feel unwelcome. That's feeling lost. That means that when I not just walk into a room, but sometimes in my own life, what I'm going through, I might feel like I'm not quite sure. Like, yeah, I maybe it's not something dramatic that's happened. It's not like there's this massive crisis, but slowly stuff has just eroded and I'm not quite sure of the direction that I should be going. I'm not quite sure if my life is fulfilling its purpose. I might be busy, but I don't know exactly if I'm busy with the right things. And as I go through the motions, I'm moving, but I'm not actually getting anywhere. And here's the thing, you might not even use the word lost to describe that. You might not even picture it like being lost. But this message is for anybody who has ever felt that way. Whether you have maybe felt that you've had a connection with God and drifted, or maybe you've felt you've never had a connection with God. Or maybe you feel like you do have a connection with God, but you can't connect with others who are outside of that. And so when we look at it, we have to look and say, if I understand what it feels like to be lost, then I should have a deeper empathy for those who are around me. Every single one of us is going to fit into one of those categories. We're either going to feel like I belong to God's family, I know what that feels like, or maybe you're going to feel like I used to belong. I knew once upon a time what that felt like, but now I've drifted and I'm not sure if I am part of his family. Or maybe you're somebody that has never felt like you've been part of God's family, like you've always felt like you're on the outside. And wherever you might be, this message is for you, because what we're going to look at doesn't change based on which group you're in. These are the universal principles that God uses as he searches out for the lost. Because the truth is that God is looking for you. That's where it starts. And we're going to look at one of the famous passages in the scriptures. It's a parable about the lost sheep. And it's from Luke chapter 15, verses 1 to 7. But when you see the parable in its context, it's so rich in its meaning. And even though this was the Lord speaking to Jewish people at the time, and it was a very specific context, the principle is very good to take from here. So from verse 1 in Luke chapter 15, it says, "Then all the tax collectors and the sinners drew near to him and to hear him." Now, tax collectors in that day, they were the same as sinners. They were disliked by everybody in the same group. And the Pharisees and the scribes complained. Now, the Pharisees and the scribes were part of the other group. They were part of the religious group that had it all together. They complained, saying, "This man receives sinners and eats with them." So the Lord spoke this parable to them, saying, "What man of you, having 100 sheep, if he loses one of them, does not leave the 99 in the wilderness and go after the one which is lost until he finds it? And when he has found it, he lays it on his shoulders, rejoicing. And when he comes home, he calls together his friends and his neighbors, saying to them, 'Rejoice with me, for I have found my sheep which was lost.' I say to you that likewise there will be more joy in heaven over one sinner who repents than over 99 just persons who need no repentance." And when we read that, we have to see the emphasis that God places. He's saying, I will go and seek the lost one. I'm not going to spend my time on the 99 that are already found. I'm not going to place all the emphasis and say, well, here we are, we've got our group and we can now just be happy. He's saying, no, I'm going to put effort in. I'm going to seek the one who is lost, because God has always been the one who seeks first. That's the principle. Without that principle, we are completely lost. There is absolutely no hope that we have. That's the emphasis of John chapter 1. It speaks about the light that came into this world, which was full of darkness. Without the light stepping into the darkness, there's no hope of us seeing anything or of knowing any truth. And so God has to move first. And that shift doesn't happen because of anything that we did. It's not that we found our way out of the dark. It's not our effort. It's not like we went on this massive pilgrimage and we found the light. No, the light came to find us. God is the one who is doing the seeking. And that's ultimately what the work on the cross really is. It is the fact that God was willing to take those steps, so that being found is not my achievement. It's not like I have a reward because I was seeking hard enough. Being found is a gift from God, because He is the one who's doing the seeking. And that means that nobody who's listening to this needs to feel the pressure of having to get it right. You don't have to tick a whole lot of boxes first before God's going to say, oh, well, now you qualified. Now I'm interested in you. He is always going to be seeking. And maybe that's the part that we have to realize, that God is already seeking, because He has always been seeking. There isn't a single person on this planet that He is not pursuing, that He is not using circumstances and life and family and saying, all of these things I'm going to use to help, to draw you closer, to convict. We have a natural tendency to obviously place a lot of value on the people that we know that are close to us. So our friends, our family, people within our church, our community, and we say, like, those are the ones that we're going to spend time with. And sometimes those are the 99. And we need to maybe look and say, well, who's the one? Who's the one that I should seek out? Because that's how God sees it. He sees it differently. It's not like He's happy with those who have accepted Him, and He's upset with those who haven't accepted Him, as if they have less value. Because God sees that you are worth looking for. And that is the essence of it. We have this picture of God sitting back with His arms crossed, waiting for us to do all of these things right before He's going to, reward us and give us good things. And what we need to change is that picture and say, no, God relentlessly, actively, and personally pursues each and every single one of us. And that's because he looks at life from a completely different vantage point. When he looks at us, he understands the value of the lost. He understands that intrinsic worth, not because of anything that you've done, but literally just because of who you are. That's what God sees. So it's easy for us to write people off. So we'll put a certain amount of effort in, and if they don't respond, or if they're difficult, or if they're asking questions and they're not interested, then I'm wasting my time. I'm going to move on. God says, no. He says, I understand your value. I understand that you are far more valuable than just the arguments that you're putting forward, the difficulty that you're displaying. You are far more valuable than any of the resistance that you have at the moment. So when God looks at it, it's because he knows the detail of the story behind that. So you and I are going to interact with people, and when they have a front or they come with an argument and all they're interested in is winning the argument, it's easy to engage with them on that intellectual level and to try and win the argument. It's easy to do that. You probably are not going to win because they are rehearsed in it, and it's probably not going to change their mind even if you do win. Why? Because that's not how human beings operate. We don't operate purely on an intellectual level. We want to know that you really care. And sometimes that's what counts, because this isn't just a spiritual thing. This isn't about winning spiritual arguments. This is a real thing. And when God looks at us, he's interested in every single detail of your life. He's interested in your hurts. He's interested in your past. He's interested in the times when you were disappointed because somebody who was in a place of authority, whether that be spiritually or not, let you down. Or maybe they even hurt you directly. And he understands that chapter. He understands how difficult that is. But God is so much bigger than all of those things. He's bigger than any individual story. And that's what he wants us to see. He wants us to be able to see beyond the facade and to look at the person behind that. And how do you get there? Well, you get there by understanding that your role towards the lost is not, I have something that I must give you and I'm going to force this on you, and what I have must fit into what you want. Like, that's not how it works. The way that we need to approach all of those around us is the same way that God approaches us, to show that we are valued, that we are worth something, that he cares. And how do you do that? By listening, by hearing them, by understanding, by spending time, by not being offended, by not being put off because they're difficult, but by going the layer underneath and saying, wow, I know there must be something there. There's something that has caused you to feel like this. And that's really unfortunate, because that's not the gospel. That's not how God loved me, and it's not how he loves you. Every soul can be found. And how can I say that? Because I know that God is seeking. And it's not just that God says that you are worth looking for. It's that he says that you are worth dying for. And that's the essence of what Paul writes in Romans chapter 5. Because at some point, every single one of us, we've all been in the same place in this story. We have all been in that place where we have been lost. And he reminds us of that from verse 6 to 8 in Romans 5. He says, for when we were still without strength, in due time, Christ died for the ungodly. And I love the way that he says we, including himself with the group of the ungodly, because we were all there at some point. And he says, for scarcely for a righteous man will one die, yet perhaps for a good man someone would even dare to die. But here's the truth, that God demonstrates his own love towards us in that while we were still sinners, Christ died for us. Not after we cleaned up, not after we stopped being defensive or arrogant or difficult, not after the fact that we started looking for him and ticking all the boxes that we need to tick, that's not when Christ died for us. Christ died for us whilst we were still in that opposition phase. Whilst we were still lost, that's when God showed his love for us through Christ. And that is the same story that we get to carry forward with everybody around us. To know that God is still seeking them. And why? Why does God do that? Because that's who he is. That's his nature. That's his character. His character is he's always going to show first. And he's going to show it in the most incredible way. And that really is the invitation today. That's the quiet and simple invitation. That if you recognize yourself somewhere in this story, whether you feel like you belong, you're accepted, you're close to God, you're with him, you're in his family, or whether you feel like, I'm not sure anymore, Warren. I used to be, but I feel distant now, and I feel like I've drifted away. Or maybe you feel like I've never been part of the family. I've never really been close to God or known him. It doesn't matter where you are in that. The principle, the truth, is that God is seeking you first, and that he wants you to be close with him. Not because of anything that you have done, but because of who he is and because of what he has done. And this goes way beyond the four walls of any building. This goes way beyond any single person or individual or organization. This is the God of the universe, the creator, the one and only true God, who says that he loves you and that he is seeking you, and that nobody needs to be lost, but that every single person has incredible value, and that God understands the story, and he's inviting us to be a part of that, and to say, will you play your role? Will you help me just to reach out to others and to show them that they are loved, and that they belong, and that they don't have to be lost, but that they can have the greatest life possible. Because while we were still sinners, Christ died for us. Because God has always been the one who seeks us first.